and they are going to give us the music teacher's perspective of preparing for online exams and the really important role that exams can play in young people's musical development. And we also have speakers from our exam boards. So we have Sarah Walker and John Holmes from the ABRSM. Sarah's the Regional Development Executive in the South West, and John is Chief Examiner for ABRSM. So thank you both for joining us. We have Jean McQueary and Natalie Christopher from Trinity. Again, an examiner and a development manager from that exam board. And finally, last but not least, we have Naveen Arls, the development manager for MTB. So each of the exam boards is going to give us a brief update on their online exams offer. And this will then be followed by our two expert teachers who are going to give us the benefit of their significant experience in how to support your pupils to prepare for online examinations. We'll then have a 5-minute comfort break, assuming we stick to time, before regrouping, when you will have the opportunity to ask our speakers questions and to explore the themes and issues that are raised in the presentations this morning. So please feel free as we go along, as questions occur to you, to pop them in the Q&A part of the webinar software. So along the bottom of your screen, you should see two little speech bubbles with Q&A underneath them. If you pop your questions in there, we will make sure they're fed through to the presenters in the second half of the session. So I'd like to start by asking our first examiner pair, Sarah and John, to give us an update from ABRSM. They're going to tell us a little bit about the online exam offer from ABRSM, what teachers need to know, and a bit of an insight into what future developments the board has planned. Welcome, John. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you very much, Emily, and lovely to be with you all this morning. Great opportunity to join this festival. We're very privileged to be getting things underway with you. I think, Sarah, you're going to share screens. I'm going to start the presentation for about 5 minutes or so, and then I'll hand over to Sarah halfway through when she can pick up in terms of our resources and theory side. So first of all, I just wanted to give a brief presentation relating to our so-called performance exams, which are in effect the digital offer that we have. But perhaps first it'd be helpful to have a moment to talk a little bit about ABRSM and give it a bit of background context. So we were established over 130 years ago. We operate in partnership with the 4 Royal Schools of Music and offer music assessments, resources and publications worldwide. And the mission of ABRSM is to inspire musical achievement. And we are a not-for-profit organisation, a charity, and the revenues that we generate are recycled into music education, supporting various projects across the world. So moving on to the specifics of our performance grades, they were launched in 2020, last year, and they are an alternative route to our practical grades. They're not intended to replace them. They're not temporary. They weren't specifically a pandemic related development. This was something that in fact we'd got underway with the ARSN, the performance only diploma, some 5 years ago. So in a way, it's been about putting rungs on the ladder below that level, taking the ARSM as a template and using that successful model to inspire and guide our development of the performance grades. Performance grades are equivalent in every way to the practical grades in terms of their demand level, in terms of their recognition, their registration on the various qualification frameworks, and in terms of the UCAS points that they attract from grade 6 onwards. They're assessed remotely. It's all about an uploaded video of performance. For that reason, they are much more flexible and accessible in some respects than the in-room live with the examiner on a specific date at a specific place, because there's a window of opportunity to record and upload your video in a place at a time that suits you best. So kind of the exam room comes to you rather than you have to go to it. So it's a question of recording your video performance and submitting that online. It's 100% relating to performance. We didn't try through the performance grades to kind of digitally emulate the face-to-face interaction of a practical grade, where the examiner, for example, delivers oral tests, hands over some sight reading, asks for a selection of scales and arpeggios, and so on. We felt that face-to-face interaction is a quintessential component of the practical grade, and we wanted to put something alongside it that has different challenges, different demands, and is not intended to be the same, or a kind of transformation or translation of the practical experience. They're available from grades 1 to 8, including the ABRSM diploma. Results are available online, and very often come through very quickly because there's no paper and pen paper involved. And so far we've examined over 100,000 of these, and looking at the data, we can be very sure that in terms of expectation of marks and standards and average attainment levels and so on, they're coming out absolutely in parallel with our experience during 2019, which was the last year we offered practical grades on a normal basis. In terms of the marking, the total is, as for practical grades, 150, and the 4 items of the program, so it consists of a video recording of 4 items. They are marked using the same criteria that we use in the practical grades, which assess control of performance, pitch, time, tone, and shape. So those criteria will be familiar, and they are the criteria that the examiners use whilst the program is unfolding for each individual item. We then turn to a different set of criteria to assess the performance as a whole, whereby we step back and kind of look through a panoramic lens and think about musical communication, musical interpretation, and musical delivery. So that's what I mean by the focus being entirely on performance, not only the individuality of each program item, 3 of which must be from the graded list at that grade, and 1 of which can be own choice at the same level of demand. But we're also stepping back and thinking about the performance as a whole. What can be said after the program is complete that we wouldn't be able to say as a holistic picture while it's unfolding. So moving on to thinking about how that works and comparing on the left-hand side of the screen the sort of traditional, probably more familiar aspects of our practical grades with the digital equivalent of performance grades. So as I said, the practical grade, very much a live face-to-face examiner-led event. Would you like to do this? Would you like to, should we move on to the so-and-so? Should we do this? Should we do that? It has a sense of interaction and examiner lead. Whereas of course in the performance grade, as it's a remote assessment that the examiner is not there, it's about submitting a video when you're ready and taking your own responsibility for that. So on the left-hand side, practical grades require that sense of kind of all-round practical musical skills in the moment, in response to some extent through the interaction with the examiner. Whereas the performance grades focus on those musical communication skills solely. So it's a holistic assessment of the supporting skills, the technical skills, the listening skills, and the notation skills. They're all kind of assessed as applied throughout that performance. So to some extent, going back to the practical grades, you're following the sequence which is set out by both the exam structure and by the examiner. To kind of follow the recipe. Whereas in a performance grade, you design your program. So much more of a sort of designer menu and taking responsibility both for the sequence of the pieces and also the pacing from one to the other. That's in the candidate's control. So practical grades require a degree of versatility. It's a sort of in the moment event where you are responding to the examiner's interaction with you. Whereas in the performance grades, it's about your personal commitment, being able to maintain stamina, physical, mental focus, and outward projection throughout the performance. And to be clear on the marking side, in the practical grades, each of the 6 sections, 3 pieces, scale, sight reading, oral, they're marked separately. It's item marked throughout. Whereas, as I said, in the performance grades, there's a combination of holistic marking, the performance as a whole, with itemized marking of the pieces one by one. So I think perhaps I might hand over to Sarah at this point to talk about the details and the practicalities of the performance grades, if that's okay with you, Sarah.
No problem. Thank you, John. Yeah, in terms of the practicalities, you have a number of options. So you can either go online and book your exam and then work towards that submission date and record your video, or alternatively you can essentially now record your video whenever you're ready, and then book the exam in the corresponding booking window. They're available every month, and we open the booking roughly around the first week of the month for examination the following month. The exam bookings and the videos are done via the ABRSM portal, just like they would be for any other practical grade exam, and you submit your video through that portal. In terms of accompaniment, under normal circumstances, the normal rules of accompaniment apply, but while we're in this situation with the pandemic, we have a number of relaxations in respect to the accompaniment. So backing tracks, for example, and unaccompanied performances are acceptable for the time being. And then the results, from the point of submission, the results are normally back to you within a week, within a matter of days actually in many circumstances. So it's a very smooth and efficient way of booking your exam. So moving on to the resources, obviously it's a new style of exam, and we're aware that people will have lots of questions, so we've prepared lots of supporting materials on our website. You can see on the left hand side we've got there, this is our how-to hub, our performance grade area of the website. You've got in here checklists, we've got videos, all of the key syllabus information. It's just a sort of whole treasure trove of information there to help you and guide you through the process of the performance grades. The checklist in particular I would refer to is very clear in terms of taking you through those steps and just making sure that you're sort of ticking those boxes and making sure that you're doing everything that the examiner is expecting to see in the exam. We've also got a whole YouTube playlist, and in there you can see students preparing for the exam and what sort of presentation required is like at the beginning, the setup of your video camera. There's a lot more from John on it in terms of the marking criteria if you want to really understand what the examiners are looking for in terms of the communication, the interpretation, the delivery of that exam. So lots to look at there if you're still in any way uncertain. Of course, any other questions you can always get in touch with us. And I just wanted to talk to you in terms of digital offer, our online theory offer. So like the performance grades, these were in the planning pre-pandemic, because we were very keen to sort of modernise the theory exam, but obviously the pandemic has brought forward our plans somewhat. The whole premise of the overhaul of the theory exams was to improve the flexibility, the accessibility of the exam, and remove the barriers to entry. And I know that a lot of you will deal with youngsters in particularly rural settings, for whom, you know, travelling to an exam centre, perhaps in a place they've never been with an examiner, you know, or an invigilator they've never met before, could be quite a daunting prospect. And so we wanted to remove those barriers, and to the point that you can now essentially take your theory exam anytime, anywhere, at your kitchen table, at your school, wherever it may be, and whenever. That was the other key thing for us. Historically, the exam's only been available 3 times a year, but now with grades 1 to 5, where we've taken them online, from the summer onwards you're going to be able to essentially log on and take your exam whenever suits. So in terms of progression, hopefully that will sort of remove the barriers. In terms of the style of the design, we're very keen to modernise it and bring it in line with the kinds of exams that youngsters will be used to seeing. In terms of SATs, you know, whatever they're encountering at school, we wanted to make sure we were keeping up with that kind of technology. And of course, we wanted to adopt the modern technology to make this accessibility possible. In terms of the actual exam, fundamentally, there's not an awful lot changing with the online exam. The knowledge is still fully tested with the new style exam. So it's available at grades 1 to 5. In terms of the question types, we've tweaked those slightly to suit the online platform, but fundamentally, as I said, that knowledge is still being tested to the full degree, really, throughout the exams. In terms of the style of questions you can encounter, we've got things like multiple choice, there's drag and drop, moving notes onto a stave, which actually many young people are now very familiar with, using Noteflight and Sibelius. They're very familiar with that sort of style of technology, and actually all of the young people that we've talked to about the exam have found it very intuitive, and they're absolutely fine with using the new platform. In terms of the handwritten element, obviously that's removed, but in terms of the preparation, that's where they'll still be writing onto the stave, and they'll replicate that by using the drag and drop technology in the test. We have tried to make the exam as accessible as possible for those with additional needs, so you can select different backgrounds. If you've got youngsters with dyslexia, you can make the text larger, so it's quite a flexible exam in that respect. And just in line with the new exam, we've just altered the marking criteria slightly, so the exam is now out of 75. So the practicalities, much like the performance grades, you book the exam via the ABRSM portal. Very straightforward. We're in a slight transitional phase with it at the moment, where we've got a booking window for the next session, which is from the 26th of May to the 23rd of June. You can take your exam if you've booked one at any time in that period, but thereafter it will be fully on demand. So from the summer, go and book whenever you need to. You don't need to worry about deadlines. Similarly, we've got a whole host of resources available on the website, which talk you through the proctoring element of the exam, because it's quite a different experience. Unlike being invigilated in a hall with someone watching you, you're now, the webcam will do that for you, but all of our safeguarding processes are overseen by the NSPCC, so you've got a very watertight way of administering these exams remotely, and you can find out more about that on our website. So in terms of those additional resources, like the performance grades, we've got tons of information available for you. We've got step-by-step guides on our website. We've got sample papers and model answers that you can play around with. We've got a whole online test, so you can go onto the website and do a test from start to finish, and it will tell you what grade you got, which is quite fun and great preparation for the real thing. We've got quizzes. We've got well, a whole new suite of books launched around the new test, which are fabulous. They're much more sort of colourful and vibrant, child-friendly than anything that's gone before, really. And they're called Discovering Music Theory, and they're a super entry point to allow you, success in the exam. So a real sort of fresh approach to online theory. As I say, it's about removing barriers and making sure that that we equip youngsters with everything we can to allow them to succeed in the exam. The other area we wanted to mention to you today, as you're dealing, as I said, with lots of remote students, remote learning, we wanted to flag our apps that are available to assist youngsters at home, particularly those who perhaps might not have a musical parent. So we've got a whole suite of apps available. We've got practice partners, which allow you to play along with the music. You can download, that's a free app, and you download your pieces one by one, and it allows you to play along with your pianist. You can drop the left hand away and you take over the left hand. You can speed up, slow down. Really, really useful tool for aiding practice. We've got the oral trainer, so for those preparing for a face-to-face exam, they can use that app to replicate their teacher, helping them along with their oral, and they can practice right through grades 1 to 5. We've got the sight reading. We've got sight reading apps for piano and violin, and they're fantastic at really forcing the learner to really think about the piece of music before they just sort of launch in and play. It'll ask you questions about the time signatures, about the key signatures before you get started, and very gamified, very child-friendly apps. Scales and arpeggios, we've got scales trainers for piano and violin, which allow you to play along, play with the band, speed up, slow down, and keep track of your scales. So it's a really useful tool to help you work on the scales that perhaps you're not so comfortable with. We've got a theory trainer app, which ties in beautifully with the online exam, in that you can work your way through the grades. It's gamified, so youngsters love it. They can work through the levels like they would in a computer game, and they're sort of inadvertently learning, which is fantastic. And then we've got the music case, which allows you as teachers to keep in touch with your students via an app. And if any of you are using apps with multiple candidates, multiple pupils, you can get a discount if you're using Apple products on that. Other teacher resources, we've got a Classical 100. Now, this is a brilliant resource for home learning and in-class learning, in that we've got 100 pieces of classical music, all with activities associated, which is it's a great way of opening up and exposing youngsters a whole host of different repertoire. You can search it by period, by style, by mood, all sorts of fun things you can do to manipulate the music you're looking at. We've got group loops, which if you're dealing with small groups of children, quite an eclectic mix, as you sometimes find in a school, different levels of instruments. You can fill in on group loops exactly the group that you've got, and it will produce a score for you, so it's a really helpful tool. We've got the music medals. If you're teaching a whole class instrumental teaching, they're a fabulous suite of exams that children can work their way up, but in an ensemble setting. We've got the play on area of our website, which is full of, we launched that during lockdown, and it's just absolutely packed full of different resources and inspiration. And we also run a Future Learn course. So for those of you who work remotely and perhaps not as part of a music hub, or if you're looking for CPD, then you can go to that Becoming a Better Music Teacher course. It's completely free. It's done in conjunction with the Open University, and it's a really super way to keep your skills fresh and move your teaching on. That was us. I've said questions there on that slide, but I think we're going to do questions at the end. So I hope that was okay, Emily. I'll stop sharing.
That's fantastic. Thank you both very much, John and Sarah. That's a brilliant, thorough and very clear overview of everything that you're doing. Yes, we'll ask questions at the end, please. So if you do have any questions for John and Sarah that are arising from that presentation, I know you've answered lots of the questions I had, which is fantastic. So yeah, if you've got any questions, please pop them in the Q&A and we will feed them through at the end. You'll be able to actually verbally ask your question, so you can write it in and then we'll probably call on you to see if you want to verbally ask it, so that I don't mangle it in the retelling. So thank you very much. It's brilliant to hear some of the things that I've heard sort of have been on the cards for ABRSM for such a long time, actually really coming to fruition, and find out all about them. And there's so much going on. So thank you for using the tiny amount of time we've given you to give us so much information. That's brilliant. I'm now going to hand over to Natalie and Jean from Trinity, and ask you guys to switch on your cameras and mics and say hello. And we'll get an update from Trinity on what's going on with your online offer. Welcome.
Hi, great. Thank you, Emily. And hello, everyone. We're delighted to join you today. Thank you for asking us. So I'm just going to share my screen with you now. Find a bit. Jean, do you want to quickly say hello?
Yes, hi there, everybody. Thank you very much for inviting us to come talk to you. My name's Judy McCreary. I'm an examiner on the classical and jazz team or panel, and I'm the regional consultant for the southeast of England. While Natalie's got her thinking face on.
Yeah, I seem to have lost my share screen thing. I'm just trying to find it. It seems to have gone walkabouts for some strange reason. I'm not quite sure where that's gone.
Ah, it was working earlier, wasn't it?
It was working earlier. It's normally there. I don't know what's happened there. Okay, shall we muddle through?
I think we can probably share I think we've got your presentation, haven't we? So
yeah, if you don't mind. Sorry, that seems to have gone. I had the view earlier, and now I can't seem to. Oh no, it's right in front of me.
You got it?
Me. Yes, I'm having a funny 5 minutes.
Monday morning.
It is Monday morning, isn't it? Right, share screen. There we go. Sorry about that. Staring me right in the face. So I'll put the presentation on, and hopefully you can all see that.
Yes.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. Apologies for that. After Monday mornings. Right. Okay. So I'm going to start off by just talking to you a little bit. We're just going to do a whistle-stop tour for you today. So to give you a very overarching view, we offer our digital exams. They are offered all of our classical grade exams from initial to grade 8, all of our rock and pop exams from initial to grade 8, and our music performance diplomas at ATCL and LTCL levels. Our digital exams are available throughout the year, So there's no set sessions at all. You don't have to book on at a particular time. You can just prepare your candidate as and when, as you normally would. And then as soon as they're ready, you can book and record the exam. They're going to be running alongside in parallel with our face-to-face exams, giving the options as to, for candidates as to which one suits them best. And having decided to book a digital exam, they will then book this through Trinity's online bookings page, which is the same one that we use for our Rock and Pop exams. And then once they are, they'll then be ready to upload their video and supporting documents. So having applied to book your exam, they will then receive login details to our upload portal within about 1 week. Sometimes this is very quick. This can be within a couple of days. Candidates from receipt of this will then have 2 weeks in which to receipt of their login details in which to upload their video, submission information form, and any other supporting documents that might be needed, like music, copies of their music, for example. So it's a good idea to make sure that if you haven't recorded the film already, that they're really, really ready to do so. Having submitted their exam successfully, candidates will usually receive their results within about 2 weeks, providing no queries are raised by the examiner. Things like technical issues can sometimes arise, so that sometimes makes things take a little bit longer. Successful candidates will then receive their certificates within about 4 weeks of receiving their result. So what remains the same as face-to-face exams? Well, there's quite a lot that's still the same. For example, they're the same examiner panels on both Rock and Pop for all of them, for classical and jazz, for Rock and Pop and for diplomas, the same people that you would be in a room with if you're in a face-to-face exam. These examiners all go and undertake the same rigorous training and standardization as for face-to-face. They're also accredited by our regulators, exactly the same as our face-to-face exams. So they carry the same currency, academic rigour, and where applicable for grades 6 to 8, UCAS and Progress 8 points. The certificates for digital exams also look exactly the same as face-to-face. There's no differentiation. You can't look at a certificate and think, oh, that one's digital. No, they're exactly the same. So I'm going to hand over to Jean now to talk a little bit more about the exam structures for digital exams. You're on mute, Jean, I think.
Sorry, got some building work going on at the back of the house, so I could put my mute on just so you don't have to listen to too much banging. So hopefully they're having a little bit of a lunch break or tea break at the moment. So for those of you who don't use Trinity, just a quick outline of our exam structure. As you can see on the screen, 66% of the mark goes to pieces. Now, and we mark out the 100, so actually it's 66 marks. That's 3 pieces, 22 marks each. And those 22 marks are divided into 3 strands. So 7 marks go to fluency and accuracy, 7 marks to technical facility, and 8 marks to communication and interpretation. And then the supporting tests, 2 supporting tests are used in face-to-face exams, and they're 10 marks or 10% each. And that's oral tests or sight reading. Or if you're initially up to grade 5, we have musical knowledge, which is like theory and action, I always think. And then we also have 3 strands of improvisation available as well. So 2 supporting tests are required. And then the technical work, so that's the scales and arpeggios, or exercises, or orchestral studies. We have quite a wide range of offer for technical work, so that you can choose with your student which is the best option for them. Thanks. Thank you. So now looking at the digital exam structure, you can see it is very, very similar. Still 3 pieces, 66% of the marks. Still 14% of the mark goes to the technical work. And then we have removed the supporting test because of the confidential aspect of it. And instead we have chosen to do 20%, beg your pardon, for 2 criteria, which we call overall performance. And I'll tell you a little bit about that in a minute. But for the moment, let's just think a little bit about the technical work. So the same changes are offered whether you're doing face-to-face exam or digital exam. But for the video recordings for the digital exam, what you actually record has been slimlined. So 2 set lists have been chosen from the face-to-face exam technical work, and these lists are published on the website. You can download syllabus, and then you can work out which ones you need to actually record on the video. We don't need everything, because just exactly the same as in a face-to-face exam, the examiner doesn't listen to every single scale and arpeggio that you've had, just a selection of them. And the overall performance, this is the section that's replaced the supporting tests. So we have two strands here. One of them is performance, delivery and focus, 10 marks. And here we're assessing the assurance and continuity of the performance. So we're looking at the transition between the different items, and that should be smoothly done and well rehearsed, not rushed, but also with not any unnecessary length of time in between, say, the pieces. Of course, you're going to take a breath, you're going to perhaps drink some water, whatever's needed to make it, to keep you comfortable, but it needs to feel natural. And we're really thinking about the whole video from the moment it starts to the moment it finishes as one continuous performance, like a recital, really, like the diplomas. And this is a very different aspect of what's being assessed. So the focus has to stay there as well. Don't get waylaid, don't talk to whoever's behind the camera, don't look out of the window. Keep the focus and keep that sense of performance and delivery all the way through. So that's 10 marks. And the other 10 marks are musical awareness. And this is where the examiner assesses whether the candidate has a real sound musical knowledge of their programme, and are they showing a convincing level of commitment to the performances that they're doing, and if appropriate, can they move between styles, and particularly for the higher grades they might start with a Baroque sonata and then perhaps go to something classical and then a modern or jazzy piece, perhaps something like that, and is it clear that they understand that the requirements of these pieces are different. So that's our overall performance, and we find that this is the new challenge. So it's nothing new to learn in terms of pieces or anything, but it's a challenge to learn how to do a complete performance, because of course in the face-to-face exam there's that natural human element in between pieces. Someone might retune, or the examiner might, say thank you to the accompanist as they leave the room. And there's those kind of dips and lulls and things going on. But in the digital exam, it's absolutely the complete performance. And that's why it's so very important that it is a video that is done in one continuous take, no pausing, no editing at all. It has to be one continuous take all the way through. Let's go on to rock and pop exams. So the digital exams for rock and pop have got a very similar structure to the face-to-face. The pieces total 80% for rock and pop. So 2 of the pieces are marked out of 25, and the third piece, which is called the technical focus, which has the technical work inbuilt into the music, that has 30 marks or 30%. And then the overall performance, which is 20%, is exactly identical to the classical and jazz overall performance. So all the criteria that I've just discussed is exactly the same for rock and pop. And then we'll look at the diploma. Well, the diploma, because of course the diplomas were already recitals, they have changed very little. So 96% of the mark goes to the actual recital, whether it's live for face-to-face or whether it's videoed for the digital, and then 4% programme planning. But otherwise there's almost no difference between the 2 levels of diplomas that we have available digitally. Okay, Natalie, back to you.
Unmute myself. Thank you, Jean. We have lots of guidance and support on the website. So there's filming guidelines, how to step-by-step video on how to submit. So there's lots of bits and pieces on the website, but we also have a dedicated email address for UK and Ireland customers. And there's a whole team of us on this email address all the time looking at it. So please do drop us a line if you have any queries. We've also got on the slide here, says it's a request for a support session, but actually it's our UK and Ireland support pages. So there you will find some checklists that you can download to have a look at. You will also see details of our webinars. So we post recordings of any webinars that we've done. So if you want to revisit, for example, all of the digital offer in more detail, we've got a webinar that you can watch back on there that goes into everything in much more granular information. My colleagues and I are lead examiner for Rock and Pop and our national, I can't remember his exact title, but national representative for Rock and Pop. We're going to be doing a webinar on that particular suite of exams and any particular information relating to those at the end of June as well. So please do look out for that. If you do want to just have a chat with somebody on the phone, we do appreciate that sometimes these things can just need talking through, just to have somebody guide you through something. And that's what we've got on the slide there. You can request a support session, and you will either have a session booked in with me or one of my colleagues, and it's just 15 to 30 minutes on the phone, just to talk you through an element of it. There's a whole menu of options, from preparing for the exam to navigating the portal, and we're happy to help you with that. Emily asked us to talk as well today about the future. And at Trinity, we're really excited about what online assessment could mean for the future of exams. And whilst I can't give you a concrete outline of what the next stage of development is going to be and what it looks like, I can give you a sense of what kind of things are feeding into the development process. So firstly, obviously, how music teaching has changed over the last year. Many of you, if not all, will have been teaching online at some point. Some would have loved it and want to do more of it and continue it into the future. Some will be looking to adopt a more blended learning approach, and others may be swearing never to log into Zoom again and never want to touch it. So we are taking all of this information and using that to kind of guide where we go with future digital assessments. And we're looking at where digital assessments fit pedagogically within that landscape. If you ever want to have a kind of feed into that, if you've got some thoughts about and you would like to feed into this process, please do drop me an email. And certainly my email's at the bottom of that slide there. Please do make a note and feel free to contact me, and I can pass this on to our academic team. Trinity as a music exam board is also in a bit of a unique position because we're not only internationally recognised, but we also offer qualifications in different subject areas, that including English language, drama and arts award, to name a few. And each of those uses a different model of assessment. So we have this wealth of experience in a wide range of assessment models that we can draw upon to kind of figure out what might be a useful a valid way of moving assessments online and having them and digitally. So we're going to be drawing upon those as well to have a look at what might work best. At the moment, Trinity's digital assessments are an online version of the trusted face-to-face format that we have been delivering for over 100 years. But there is an opportunity now to develop something for the digital age, which has the potential to be something completely different. And that for us is really, really exciting. So with that, I'll draw it to a close. So thank you, Jean, and I'll hand back over to Emily.
Thank you, Jean and Natalie, ever so much. Again, really thorough and really clear, and lots more exciting things for us to explore when we want to go deeper. So thank you very much for that. It's been really interesting to hear about kind of what changes and what stays the same when you move to digital, which is, of course, what we've all been navigating this year. And as well to reflect on that challenge of performing to camera, which as well all the grown-up musicians have had to do, but it's doubly hard when you're just a young person trying to do that for the first time. So thank you very much. Again, I think there'll be lots of questions coming up, so I'll just ask you all as delegates to raise your hand or pop your question in the Q&A if you've got questions for Natalie and Jean. And I will now hand over to Nav from MTB, who is going to tell us about your offer. Good morning, Nav.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me and all of us, in fact, and coming to spend time with everybody here. Just to check clearly, can everybody hear me? Could I get a quick thumbs up or somebody type something in the chat? Is that all fine? Thank you, Emily. Perfect. And following Emily's example, don't be fooled by the accent. I'm a brown-faced Indian kid who is sitting in a beautiful room wearing a fancy white shirt, and sitting maybe a little bit too close to my camera. So let me back up a little. And yes, my name is Naveen Arles. I work with MTB as our community and development manager, as I've just discovered my title got changed to last week. And I see that we're a little behind where the schedule has put us. So I'm going to just do the thing that I think I need to do most, which is introduce MTB to many people. I think there's still a case of we're the new kid on the block. So we have a little bit of homework to do to bring you all to the table with us. Firstly, though, thank you so much to both the other boards. I'm loving hearing about all of the stuff. And I have, just to put clearly on the table, we have a great deal of respect for the huge impact and volume of work that they have had to shift in a very short space of time to deal with the pandemic. So, all respect to the amazing work they've been doing for the last couple of years. Loving those little apps ABRSM have already produced. I'm thinking my 6-year-old daughter would love some of them. I'm going to check them out later. And from hearing from both of them, that it's really fantastic that at this time when we've needed to make these changes and find ways to really support teachers supporting the students in this craziness, that everybody's managed to make sure that all of the assessment models still have all of the rigor around them and still have all the offerings from UCAS and et cetera, et cetera. So it's good to see that all those models have really stood through these couple of years, and slightly jealous of hearing about all the theory and advanced diploma kind of bits of information there from both those boards. But watch us, we're coming. We're both of those will be there with you shortly. Now, I speak a little bit quickly and I mumble, so please feel free to stick things in the question, or wave at me and say slow down and repeat that, please. So just really quickly, Music Teachers Board, the MTB. I myself am a choir director based in London, but we are all at the senior end of the organization. Everybody who's a decision maker is a vastly experienced teacher of 20, 30, 40 years experience. So everything that MTB does is an attempt to really kind of hit the cold face of what you are all experiencing as teachers. So just really quickly, if I share the screen, and what I want to do as I share anything is just show you what's on our website, so you can very easily know where you get this information. So right on our homepage, you see here that 10 years ago, the idea of, well, if a conversation about, well, if the GCSEs and the A-levels can do this recorded methodology, we record the stuff, send it to someone, they assess it, send it back, couldn't that be brought to the music exams? So 8 years ago, we actually found it. So we weren't, you will have just begun to hear about us during the pandemic, but we aren't a pandemic product. So 8 years ago, the thing was formed. Now, we can't quite compete with the grandness of ABRSM and Trinity in history, but we've been around for a bit, took 5 years to get that off-call regulated status, and now here we are. So as you see there, some kind of the overarching statement that defines us is that our exams are recorded in audio or video with our app submitted online and marked by instrument specialist examiners. And I've just very quickly made sure that's still sitting there in front of you. Those are the 6 kind of big things that we want to talk about with everybody, about why, we thought another exam board should be on the table. And very clearly, let me say, obviously horses for courses. They're going to be kids who love that experience of walking into the exam room, meeting with an examiner and performing to someone that they've never met before in a room that they've never been in before. That none of that phases them. They're built for that. And then all of us know we've all got students who don't cope with that so well and aren't going to get there. So what we really believe in is making music assessment accessible to everybody. And we want every kid to have the right to the same certificate. So if we were to be able to say, well, record your assessment on any day of the year, whenever the student is ready, then they can, in an environment that, and I loved what John said in terms of the relationship between teacher and student is so vital and so important that is what's respected. And therefore, in your safe environment with your teacher, record whenever you're ready to go and then submit it. And then that work can be assessed. And then the other bit that I think is we've all had those conversations where we bump into someone who's, oh, I wish I'd kept my piano going when I was at school. I wish I kept singing. I wish I kept playing violin, whatever. And we've always wondered, or all of us have felt a little bit of frustration at points about losing those people. And we don't want that to be the case. We don't want that to be the story. So we really want students to be able to get to whatever music keeps them involved wherever they are, at whatever point in their own personal journey they're on. So we have this idea of complete free choice. So of course we publish syllabuses, but students can bring to the table any music so long as it's grade appropriate and perform that. So we have specialist instrumental examiners, which again, just a little background point there to put on the table to remind everybody. So you submit a trumpet exam to MTB, a trumpeter looks at it. You submit a violin exam, a violinist looks at it. So we fully understand that every examiner is a really exceptional musician and is really well trained. But we would also like to kind of safeguard a little bit of their level of pressure, where they're not having to assess an exam for an instrument that maybe they've never taught or never even played. So we want to offer that as a kind of thing that secures that student's kind of progress, but backs up the teacher in giving technically specific feedback, which we're finding a lot of people who are using the board are really enjoying getting that, because the student gets to read about exactly what they were doing and how that works, and maybe that could be tried in a different way, etc. I've put the points of convenience with no need to travel, just because, as was mentioned already, actually, that thing of people needing to, we speak to people in Zimbabwe and they've got to drive into Botswana, South Africa, people in Brunei who can't have the exam there. How's that relevant to us? Well, even at the north end of Scotland, it's a bit of a trek, 120 miles to the nearest exam centre. So finding those situations where the family, when we talk about making music accessible to everybody, the family that's supporting this candidate, maybe they don't have to step out of their normal weekly schedule. Maybe they can just have the exam recorded when they would normally do it. Maybe the family don't have to figure out a way to get out of work for half a day, pick up a kid and take them to an exam centre. Actually, the exam's just going to be recorded when the normal lesson time would happen anyway, in whatever normal situation that's happening. So again, that's all really beneficial. So, and just as a quick reminder that we are Ofqual and UCAS regulated, just like everybody else. So the same points for grades 6, 7, and 8. And just really quickly, if you were to go up here and have a look, you'd see all of our in-depth publication on our marking criteria for all of our exams. You'd see the team behind us. You'd see the pricing structure. Again, in terms of accessibility, we've we managed to reduce the costings on the exams because we don't have those other overheads. And then the free webinars for people to find out about us. But we've just got all of the simple overhead information right there so people can get to it if you want to. So one other quick thing to mention is that as a board, we have this one book policy. Just because all of our supporting tests, all of our technical exercises, everything pre-composed, pre-recorded, ready, set up is on the website for people to use, whether they're doing an MTB exam or not during this crazy period. But that way the family only really has to buy one publication for the kid to be able to, or for the self-learning adult to be able to get to the exam. So a book with 3 pieces in it, if they want those pieces, fantastic. If they want those pieces, they can buy that, because all of our supporting tests are freely available from our site. So they would just come here, grab everything they need for the exam at each grade point in whichever instrument, and then go for the exam. So we're trying to find ways to reduce all of the barriers that would help everybody really get to the table. And of course, then one of the ways we've done that is that we've set up an app. Let me just kind of grow the size again. Before I do that, this is obviously on our site from the link to the app, just so you can see a little bit about what it looks like. I have to make it quite big. It's a really simple to use app, handles everything. Therefore, the family at home, if you're teaching still virtually, or even you, if you're not that comfortable and feel a bit technophobe, then everything is pretty easily handled within this one app. The recording facility or the video facility, how to submit it, what to do with it. It's all within the one contained, downloadable, easy to use app. So you've got clear instructions on every screen. The app forces flight mode and forces a sound test just to make sure, sound check, make sure that everything's working. And then you do the recording. And I loved what was already said about exams must feel like exam conditions. So one clean take, and then at the end you take images of all the things you might need to submit with that. So pictures of the scores, ID if that's required, and then off you go, you hit submit. So just to remind you, that was record any day of the year, register for the exam any day of the year, submit it any day of the year, done. So just in case people didn't know about the background of MTB, I just thought it might be a little bit useful for us to put those things on the table. Once you've got the app and it's free to use and you've never done it before, so you're thinking, how do we do this? I love that also that you've seen examples already of the ability to try out an assessment online completely to make sure that it really works and that you're ready for it. So here we have on the page where you would make an entry to an exam, you'd pick your instrument for the exam, obviously, and then put in all your other details for what you're doing. We've got the ability to apply to do a free practice exam, which is entirely cost-free and not assessed or submitted to anybody. So but you can go through the whole process. So you can run a mock exam with the family at home, just so that they know what it feels like and the student is ready for it. Of course, you could run several mock exams and then just not tell them and pretend that one of them, and just hit record on one of them, and they've actually done the exam and they're ready. But you know, however you need to support your student, I am obviously kidding with that, but we have an opportunity there for you to be able to do this. Now, if you then want to see which of our syllabuses are available to use and how to do that, you can see the varying instruments that we've already set up in terms of future proofing and growth, as we've been asked to talk about today. We have just developed our performance exams, so I'm going to talk about them now, but we are continuously right now growing. So we're putting new syllabuses on the table all the time. We just added percussion a couple of weeks ago, incidentally timed with the young Fang winning Young Musician of the Year. I can't tell you how happy I was about that moment. But yeah, so just keep an eye on us, and as you need them, syllabus is arriving. Harp is coming very quickly behind. We've got a little bit of catching up to do with the power of ABRSM and Trinity, but we're on our way. So just really quickly, if you would click on that link, you'll end up with this tab anyway. We have our new performance exam. So everything we do is a music exam like you would expect from the other boards, as you've already had clear layouts of. Practical exams that require 3 pieces: musicianship and technical exercises. Those musicianship technical exercises are completely available to view on our site and download and use, whether for exam or not. And then the 3 pieces that, as I said, either you get one book and you try and get those, or you can buy our now launching publication series, which will have everything for that grade in one place if they want it. And then of course, if you're doing complete free choice, which includes everything from the student's own composition through to your arrangements of whatever, you can submit any of those to us for free, and we'll assess them to make sure they're correctly appropriate for the grade standard. And our practical exams, all of the breakdowns are available from each of the links there. But if you were to then think about these new performance exams that we're offering, again, register for them any day, record them any day, submit them any day, results within 2 weeks, even when we're busy. So, you know, it's a very fast process, which you can do whenever the student is ready. So you aren't having those peaks and troughs of waiting for when they are getting ready for a specific date. With the performance exams, we have talked about target durations. So you've got 4 to 5 pieces as a recommendation, but really what we're thinking about is these target durations. So if you were to look at the higher UCAS pointing grades 6, 7, and 8, of course, difficult pieces can sometimes be a bit quick. So, you know, we've got a window. They just walk onto the camera. These are all done by video through the app. You have them perform their assessment. Great when you can hear the grandparents in the background having little pauses in between the pieces, just to give them a sense of occasion, and then they walk off. But they have to choose their own program, which with our free choice aspect means they can literally choose their own program. And they're developing towards that sense of, come play an assembly, can you do 9 minutes? That's your stage time. So they have to figure out what they need to play for them to do well, what audience they're playing to, and what material they're choosing. So they'll be assessed on technicality and musicianship, absolutely. And then they'll be assessed on stagecraft and artistry. So they are to walk on, perform their recital piece, meet their timed stage expectation, and walk off. So these new performance exams are already underway, and people are enjoying doing them. So I'm going to stop my share because I'm done. And I don't want to take up too much more time, but that's just a quick overview of who we are, where we've come from, what you could expect from us in general. And, you know, in the coming space, just keep an eye, because our diploma levels are coming, theory grades are coming, new syllabuses for all the instruments we still don't have. And if anybody would like to, we'd love to see our first ocarina exam. Please do buy an ocarina and learn how to play that. I'm looking forward to your questions at the end. Thank you again for the time this morning, and for the other boards too.
Thank you so much, Naveen. I had an ocarina when I was little, although I never took an exam in it, but I loved it. As you say, I think it's brilliant to hear how MTB is a relatively new player on the board, alongside Trinity and ABRSM. The other boards all have this rigor, access and innovation, you know, as absolute core principles coming through all that you all do. So thank you so much for telling us all about what you at MTB have been doing and what's coming next. My niece also is a harpist, so I'm very excited that's coming on stream as well. I will let her know. And it's just brilliant to have so much innovation and diversity in this field in terms of different boards offering different things and different offers, and it's really exciting to hear about. So thank you for telling us about MTB's place in all of that. That's brilliant. I love the idea of recreating performance conditions at home with family members as well. That's perfect. Yeah, so you're not actually performing to your camera or your phone, you're performing to the other people at home and recreating that. That's such a good idea. So thank you. So we've heard from all of our boards now, and there's, as they've all said, there's loads and loads of information that they've given you, but loads of information on all of their respective websites as well. And this webinar plus that information will be available on the Connect Resound YouTube channel and on our websites as well afterwards. So there is the opportunity to go and delve deeper into the offer of all three boards after today. We're now going to hear from the other side, from the teacher's perspective, and I'm very grateful to Judy and Georgia and to musictutors.co.uk who have connected us up with them for coming along today and telling us about your experience of preparing students for exams, what young people need to know, and maybe some more information about sort of apps and tech that you can add to your armour, particularly when thinking about online exams. So I'm going to hand over now, first of all, to Judy Proctor, who is going to give us the teacher's perspective of how to prepare students for examinations and really the role that exams play in a young musician's development. Good morning, Judy.
Good morning.
Hi.
I don't know whether you see is my video.
Your video.
Apparently you have to allow my video.
There you go. We can see you.
Good morning, everybody.
Welcome.
Welcome. Yes. Okay. So my name's Judy Proctor, and I'm a graduate of the Royal Academy of Music, where I studied oboe and piano. I'm a freelance oboist, orchestral, and I play cor anglais in the Lonnock Oboe Trio. And I have been teaching theory, piano, and oboe, and submitting children for and adults for ABRSM exams since the 80s. Now, over the years, I have realized that where building the foundation for a basic musical technique is concerned, for children to be able to express themselves as freely, if not as competently as possible in their performing music making, it's highly beneficial, if not necessary, to also study theory, scales, oral, and sight reading, as well as their repertoire pieces. As I feel there are no shortcuts, I like to encourage the pupil to be happy to do this groundwork and understand why these other elements are part of becoming a successful musician. And whilst this process is often long, it does not have to be boring. Quite the contrary, it can be fun, especially nowadays with the far more readily available educational tools, either in book or app form. It is much easier for the teacher to help their pupils to become the best musicians they can be. And I strongly feel it's my responsibility to make it as fun, engaging, and encouraging as possible. And I've also found that once the pupils realise that gaining these techniques help with their performing, they are soon very enthusiastic to learn more and be prepared to put the work in. So here are a few of my methods for preparing children for their ABRSM exams. I often teach some children from the age of 5, and so I start with theory. Theory is where it all starts. So beginners and adults alike, I like to allocate at least 15 minutes. For 5-year-olds, I use the POCO range, Theory for Young for young children. Books 1 to 4 take you up to grade 1, and helpfully, as children's memories can be short-term at this point, they also publish 3 other books, theory drills, letter names, time names, performance terms. The books all have stickers, which is very helpful for children whose handwriting has not developed fully, because they're able then to show you very clearly that they do understand. Then I introduced Poco's Next Range, the music theory for young musicians, grade 1 to 5. And I also use these books for my adult pupils, as their teaching points are so clear. And also it's fun. The books are colourful, they've got little pictures, it's great. Now, I've also recently got my pupils to complete the ABRSM Discovering Theory books as a way of revision and preparing themselves for the new exam question formatting that the digital ABRSM theory exam is now offering. And then if there is enough time, I also ask the children to work through the Paul Harris Improve Your Theory books, as these books encourage the children to utilise, appreciate, recognise the theory that they've learnt when studying the repertoire pieces they are learning, so they can apply these disciplines. And I just want to make the point that I believe it's very important when the children are learning theory to use old-fashioned handwriting as much as possible, especially when learning how to write music. So it's great that there's digital and all this drag and dropping and all the rest of it, but please, 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 pencil and a rubber and some manuscript paper. Okay, now we come to scales and arpeggios and relating studies. I try to allocate a minimum of 15 minutes for scales and arpeggios. As my pupils have studied theory, they understand scale structure much more easily and are pleased to then discover how the scales work on their instruments. And they often quite like this regularity. It gives them a feeling of being able to, you know, do something that's substantial without having to think too much or read notes. I use the Paul Harris Improve Your Scales, grade 1 to 5 books, and the children enjoy doing the related study pieces. And they enjoy the fact that all of a sudden, oh, okay, they can read not just black dots, but a group of black dots that is an ascending scale or an arpeggio, which I think is mainly the point of why we do the scales. So I also use a circle of fifth charts that's just printed on a plain piece of paper, and I get the children to colour in each section for each key, so they get an understanding that each key has a different colour and a different energy, and they like to do that. Now I also get my pupils to do parallel and contrary motion scales from the beginning, and they can see the patterns either way. Now, finger exercises. Apart from a few personally created finger exercises, I use Dozen a Day for grade 1 to 5, then after grade 5, Hannon, Czerny and Kramer. I've also been using some of the Lang Lang books for grades 6 to 8. The children love the harmonic simplicity of these exercises and also surprised when they're able to transpose the exercises into other keys relatively easily. And this again helps with their understanding of how the degree of each scale works. Tonic, dominant, etc. When we teach children these technical terms in grade 2, but it's as if they're never used, and they must be used, I think, in their playing. Right, sight reading, good old sight reading. I have been using Paul Harris's Improve Your Sight Reading books, grade 1 to 5. These are excellent for instilling the need for the children to count a steady beat and understand where that beat falls. And by using the beat to help propel them forwards, often to do something that they didn't think that they could do, because often sight reading is initially quite instinctive, on the edge of your seat kind of thing. And there is an excellent steady build-up of complexity through the stages. In the last month before the exam date, I often get the children to return to the earlier stages in the book so that they have an appreciation of how much their sight reading has improved, which gives them confidence, because often young folk just hate sight reading, and it's pride. They feel it's not something that they can do, and they don't like to be pushed out of their comfort zone. So it's important to give them the techniques so that they can use their theoretical skills to read the intervals in the music and recognise the scale passages, etc., etc., and to keep this steady beat. Now, I know that Alan Bullard has also completed a set of sight reading books entitled Joining the Dots. This is for piano, but I think also the other instruments. And Paul Harris has completed a set of books entitled A Piece a Week. So there's lots of material, so much material. There's sort of no excuse really. Okay, so now we come to oral. Now I teach children how to sing a major, and minor scale and arpeggio using solfa from quite an early age. It may not sound it now, but I was a junior student in Glasgow, and I had a Scottish education where, because of the French influence, we were all taught solfa, and I loved it. It helped. I think it's very good for giving scale exercises and for the children to understand how to sing. Often it's not that they've got a bad ear when they can't do the memory or the singing back part of the oral, it's just that they're not used to singing. And so you have to give them a tool to sing, and the minute you give them a scale, bingo, they can sing back. But I also, so I use an oral app that helps me just get through all the requirements without having to, worry too much about me reading music. And there's lots of selections out there, either ABRSM or eMusic Maestro. And I think Georgia's going to give a whole lot of other examples. But I also encourage the children to sing the melody lines of the pieces that they're studying using solfa. So again, they get an understanding of the first, second, third, fourth degree, where the semitones are. This is more important in a funny way for oboists for intonation, but and also for helping to memorize their pieces for studying. So finally, we come to the pieces, and this is where the fun starts. So in order for these lovely pupils to be able to express themselves as fully and possible as possible through their performing. So having made sure the children understand how to read notes through their theoretical studies, I will start the pieces, will help the children make inroads into their pieces by teaching them through practical demonstration. Literally, look, repeat, or listen, look, listen, repeat, so that they're also then using their memories and oral skills initially, and they're not getting overwhelmed by all these black dots and what to do. All the fingerings are very clearly marked in the music, as well as the beats, so that they can refer to that when they need to. They will be encouraged, as always, when they play, to initially to chant out loud either the finger numbers, the letter names, or the beats. And I always teach the bass line of the left hand first to encourage the children to count their beat clearly at this point. To encourage fluidity, I'll play one hand while they master the other hand. And when I teach the oboe, I'll sit opposite them, and again, they'll do the, I'll play a phrase, they have to repeat it. Now, the other main thing is I will concentrate only on 2 bars at a time and get them perfect, and get them so that the child can really feel that they understand. And then we do the next 2 bars, and then we do the next 2, and then we join them up. And I find that's very successful. And then finally, time management. I create weekly practice charts for the children leading up to their exams that list all their scales and pieces, and then there's a column for Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, whatever, and whether they, and then they get an idea of how much they've got to do. There's also a time clock for how many weeks they've got until the exam to give them a reality check there, and then just making sure they know how to spend time on which aspect or whatever. And that's about it, really. And then just hopefully by that point, the children are much more comfortable in their ability. If they can perform at school beforehand, do a little concert for their family. Nowadays, recording is so easy, so it's helpful. And I think the children get a nice idea of whether they're able to play it or not. I must admit, I like the idea of having an audience. I'm a performer. I know that my performance, each performance is different because of having an audience. So I do encourage my children to only do the practical exams, but I'm a metropolitan. I live in London. I'm not in the Highlands or in a remote part of Scotland. So it's easy for me, and the children are not having to travel too far. And that's about it. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Judy. That was fantastic. Really, really interesting. Again, loads and loads of resources, which I'm definitely going to go and explore after today. And thoroughness, rigour and fun, which again are themes that have come through what everybody said this morning, and building in that confidence and competence from the very start. Really important themes. So thank you for taking us through that. We've got 19 minutes of this webinar left, so I'm now going to very quickly hand over to Georgia, who's going to give us a bit of information about apps and tools and techniques, and then we're going to have 9 or 10 minutes for questions. So I'll just encourage you to, if you have questions for any of our panellists, pop them in the Q&A, and we can make sure then, if they're written in now, that we get them answered. So thank you so much, Judy. That was really fantastic. And I'm now going to hand over to Georgia, our last speaker of the morning. Morning, Georgia.
Good morning, everybody. So I'm just going to flip to my FaceTime camera. You may want to pin my video to or into pin or put it into speaker view so that you can actually see what I'm going to show you today. I will be sharing with you some of the tools that I use for online teaching, and hopefully inspire you to see what's out there. You might have heard of these things before, but in sharing with you my kind of discoveries, hopefully it will give you some more things to use within your own teaching. So the first thing I'll explain is I'm going to break it down into 3 different aspects. We've got gear, application or apps, and software. Now, obviously there's crossover there, but I just thought it'd be an easier way to describe all of these things. And the main reason for doing this is because I'm looking at VARC models, so the 4 different learning styles, so visual, auditory, reading, writing, and kinesthetic. And in using all of these tools, I hopefully cover all of the different learning styles with my students so that nobody's left behind. So I am going to take you over to the OBS studio. I'll explain that in a second. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you this. So we're going to talk about gear. So I will at the end show you a little picture of my setup, but as you can see, I've broken down the gear into 4 different topics. The first is lighting. Now, if you're teaching throughout the hours or you're teaching after we lose the lights, it's important to have a visual that's engaging for your students. So I've put there from the very cheap options of just using the window behind the camera or lamps to light up your face. There are other options with gear like ring lights. That tends to be a bit more shadow casting if you've got a bigger screen, and LED softboxes being much more of the high end. And we have stage lighting or background colour for particularly a sort of enhanced experience during the lesson. The second thing is utilization of cameras, multiple cameras. You can always use the one on your main screen, whatever device you're using, but don't forget you can use your iPhone, your iPad, or a USB Logitech webcam, something like that, to plug into so that you have other views of different angles of your instruments, close-ups, or overhead views. The next thing was stands. So in terms of what you can equip your sort of desktop situation with, you could do what I started to do as we went into lockdown, was I used a mic stand because I had one spare, and I had a wrist warmer and a hair tie that I would literally put my phone on top to get a visual of the keyboard. So that was a very cheap option, but then I sort of branched out into swan neck desk clamps, or you could go the high-end version again, which is a camera tripod with a transverse center column. KRK do a very amazing one, which also works for filming if you want to do some promo material. But yeah, they're currently doing a sale, so they've got 30 quid off, and it's reduced from 100 quid to 70 pounds. There are cheaper ones out there. That was just what I used. And finally, your sound. So the way I've got my setup is I've gone for example, a condenser microphone, but having backup options because a lot of tech tends to fail. I've also got, inbuilt microphones, other options. I've put also to talk about the smart devices. So I have a smart device in this room so that there is sound So if I need to play a recording or inspire the student and whatever reason I have to play some music, it's actually happening in conjunction with what I'm doing with my instrument, rather than lagging or sound share. And sharing computer sound, which is also an option. I also have a Bluetooth plug-in speaker that I can connect my phone to, so if I'm showing any apps, the sound is amplified in the room. And lastly, the main thing I wanted to share with you was headphones, because I started off with studio headphones, which are like closed headphones, these sort of things. And I found it was very, very tiring for me for the hours I was teaching. Having one off to hear myself actually sort of damaged my ears towards, you just hear a difference in one ear being overworked. So I went to plug-in headphones, which are just inside. And then, as you can see, I'm using my Bluetooth headphones today, because I can select, obviously, a different microphone so that it's not using the microphone from my headset. I'm just hearing the students through my headset. Cool. That's gear done. And our next bit, should we say, I'm just going to change. Here we go. Our next one is applications. So I contact all of my students via WhatsApp or their parent, depending on the age. And this enables me to do voice recordings, to keep a log of all of their learning class notes, and in touch with clear communication with parents as well. So I can send videos there, and it's just very, very accessible. It's also really easy for me to keep tabs on all of my students, and they're happy to use this. I know WhatsApp had a privacy change, so there are other apps like Signal that are around if you want absolute privacy. Next one is Spotify. ABRSM have some amazing supporting apps, which I will talk about in a second, and they've already talked about, but Spotify also has some of their recordings. So for example, for piano grades 1 to 8, they have the recordings on Spotify, which are really useful for students to listen to on their way to school, on the bus, and I encourage that they have that oral connection to what they are actually practicing. If you haven't heard of Amazing Slow Downer, it is one of the most incredibly powerful apps. You can take a recording, you can slow it down, you can loop it, and particularly when I'm trying to give notes at the same time as playing, I find this a really handy way. So whether it's a recording I've made or whether it's a recording that I'm using, being able to you can change the pitch of the thing. You can also change the pitch by like a micro tuning. So if it's an old recording, some of the older classical recordings are slightly out of tune, you can just change it as well with fine tuner. Audacity is a free application, free program. It's kind of software really, but that's another audio editing tool that I use regularly. And so the other platforms, so I work with a lot of different exam boards. I have students submitting for Trinity, ABRSM and RSL. I haven't got any MTBs yet, but if you guys fancy taking out maybe whistle or accordion as part of your extra instruments catered for, then I think I'll be all ears. What else? So music notes. A lot of my older students are really enjoying having a little break from the exam board pieces, and every now and again they'll provide the sheet music from music notes because there's an interactive element to it. So it's like, imagine you have the sheet music in the app and it will play it with a cursor, and you can loop certain sections. So if they're really struggling when I'm not there, they might be able to loop a section and hear it, for example. YouTube, you can slow tracks down on YouTube. Don't forget, that's another tool that's really accessible to students. A lot of these apps are useful for students in their own time and their practice and development. And Voice Record is another app that I really enjoy. Same thing, you can speed it up, slow it down. You can do instant records to save your voice. For example, if you are teaching singing or an instrument that can be quite taxing if you're doing 9 hours of teaching a day. And then finally, that's the applications done. I'm just aware of time, so I'm going to start to go a little bit quicker. This software I'm using is OBS software. You can see there's a lag today, which is unfortunate. Tech issues happen, and I will be fixing that. But it was in changing all the settings to make it super duper for today, I actually ended up making the video process slower, so I apologise for that. Synesthesia is a really cool piano roll. So if you're teaching, for example, an instrument which is difficult for the student to pick up, a little ornament or some grace note, you can visually do that on this piano roll if you have a piano connected to your device. And Meticulous, this is mainly for if you're teaching piano, because you can have a MIDI piano on screen. I use metronomes in my teaching. I also use the Kindle app for a lot of the earlier books. And if you don't know Spalius already, it's a music, a sheet music program where you can record, you can actually transcribe your exercises for the students if you want to keep it fresh and keep all of those kind of tools a bit fun and separate to the scales. You can always add extra. Logic, again, making MIDI scales. If your students haven't got the app, you can always design recordings through that. And Steam Deck is so that I can change all of the views. So as you can see, I'm going to flip through a couple of screens. So the first one I have is this front view. The next one is my keyboard. So I'm just going to give you a little sample, and you can hear that. And of course, like, this is all kind of work in progress and it will change. So you've got the keyboard here. I have a tuner app. I also have a hand camera. And I also have this synth roll, which is quite exciting. For some students, they like to see a visual thing that makes them really excited. We have the Kindle app, so if they're learning Mary Had a Little Lamb, for example, or something as fun as that. And I think the only thing to show you next is just a picture of my setup. So I'll just show you a little photo. And that's my studio at the moment. So that's where I am. I'm just going to wrap up there because I know we're out of time. I'm just going to take it to my FaceTime. So we should be back in sync with the audio. I hope you enjoyed that. If you have any questions, like I say, we're going to have a little break and you can ask some questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Georgia. So much to take in there, and I'm very grateful for you to adding in text all the different links to all you were talking about, because there's so many exciting things, and the way that you differentiate what you do using technology to suit the learning needs of all of your pupils is really inspiring. So thank you so much. We've had such a lot of information. I'd just like to thank all of our speakers for sharing so much in a very short time that I gave you. I gave you all a completely impossible challenge, and I'm very grateful to you all for meeting it. So no, just very, very thankful for such an informative session, and we've all got so much more to explore and to take forward after what you've told us all. We've got, thanks to my timekeeping, which isn't as good as any music pupil or any teacher, we've got a short amount of time for questions now. None have come through on the Q&A yet, but I'd like to invite you all, as delegates and as panellists, if you have any queries for any of our panellists or a general query for everyone, if you want to raise your hand or pop it in the Q&A now, this is your time to ask questions. I'm very grateful to everyone for sharing their contact information, as well as speakers, those of you who work for the exam board, so that we all know we can go back and ask you questions after today around sort of specific things to do with pupils' exams and to do with your processes. So thanks for that. I'm not seeing any questions come through. I think I'm just looking through. I had some questions coming through as I was watching. I was interested to hear from many of you. Obviously, one theme that sort of we've got one attendee raised your hand. Let me just find out who that is. Hi, I'm just going to allow you to speak your question. Hi, good morning.
Hi, good morning. This is NK from India. And
hi, NK. Welcome.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm a music teacher and I teach music for 15 years. and I also study music and I also teach music at the school. And I have a question that my students are preparing for exam under Rock School, RSL board at Trinity and ABRSM. But I got to know something about MTB. So, so Ms. Georgia was talking about that, the same thing. So you guys can help me about that, how I can get the syllabuses from the MTB, so I can introduce the syllabus in India and as also in my town. So I want to know more about the MTB. So this providing a syllabus like the RSL board and Trinity ABRSM, like, it's a question.
I'll just jump straight in. It's very easy. Good morning. Nice to meet you. Where in India are you?
Yeah, I'm from India.
Where in India?
I'm from Eastern Zone. It's Odisha.
Nice. So I'm from Bangalore. Hey.
Yeah.
Just really quickly, I put the syllabuses link in the chat. I'm sure we'll get to you afterwards, because for you to get to know more about us, they're free webinars. You can kind of jump on board. Every week we run those. So just do that. And then we won't take up more time because we've already done the introduction bit now.
Yeah.
Very excited that you're keen to get on board. Watch the space we're about to launch in India, and then you'll have a local set of delegates who will help you get local information. And I'll stop topics. I'm so excited to say something else, but I can't. I'm not allowed to.
Very exciting, right? We will keep an eye then, Nav. Thank you, and we will keep you posted, NK, on the India offer. That's brilliant. Is there anyone else who has a written or a spoken question that you would like to ask our panel? We've got 3 minutes left, a tiny window. Panelists, if you have any questions for one another, if exam boards have questions for teachers or vice versa, that'd be great. We've got a panelist question. Alex. Morning, Alex. I think you can talk now.
Good morning. What a fabulous presentation, and thank you to everybody for doing so this morning. Just a question here about as in-person things, as normal things as we knew them, become more possible. I just think our sector has done such a good job over the last 12 months of learning new stuff and adapting. Is there something that you feel very strongly that you want to keep, something that you've learned or developed this year that you really think it's important that we keep as we go forward into the new normal, whatever that looks like?
That's a lovely question. So I think I'd like to ask each of our panelists in turn to just quickly reflect on that as our sort of closing moment. So I'm just going to start with who's at the front of my screen. So Sarah, I'm going to ask you first of all to say what you would like to keep from this year.
From ABRSM's point of view, then the performance grades are very much here to stay. You know, we brought them online very quickly, and initially they were very helpful in allowing us to sort of see through the pandemic period and allowing musical progression. But they have slotted in beautifully, and as you know, we predicted pre-pandemic. As I said, they were in the planning, but they sort of align with our practical grades, and we hope will open up musical progression for far more students than ever before. You know, those who find going into the exam room difficult, those who sort of plateau, who reach a certain level and sort of pull away from the exam system for whatever reason, then we hope that by having all these alternative routes that there'll be just more options. And I think it's also taught us that in terms of adaptability, that this 130-year-old organisation actually can adapt very quickly, and I think it's really exciting now, and you know, I'm positive that you will see more and more adaptations going forwards and more routes to access progression. So I think that's what it's taught us, that we can change and we can do it quickly, and there are exciting things to come.
Thank you, Sarah. That's fab. Jude, do you have anything that you would like to keep from this year, this crazy year?
Okay. Yes, I think one of the things that I found helpful was having more frequent little Zoom sessions during the week to just get the children at their instrument and start them with some practicing. And it was partly because I wasn't doing so much traveling and I had lots of time, but it soon just became, it was beginning to give them good habits for sitting down. I just wanted to also make one other comment. This isn't not so much about this pandemic year, but I'm a little concerned at the ABRSM presentation that there is an assumption that the practical exam has nothing to do with performing. And I've actually, in the last few years, if I'm honest, felt a little bit galled at some of the examining results, because it's as if they're not concerned with the musicianship in the practical exam. So I welcome some reflection on how performing is extremely important. But please don't assume that if you're doing the performing exam, you can't perform in a practical exam. So I'm just a little concerned at that.
Thanks, Jude. Really good reflection and really good feedback, which I'll let John pick up when we get through to John. Thank you. I'm going to keep with my process of who's on my screen first. So before going to John to pick up that point, I'll hand over to Jean. Just anything quickly you'd like to keep from this year, Jean?
Sorry, just unmute. Yes, I think it's been fascinating to see how the digital products have been embraced by students and teachers. And I think that's really something to build on. And I'd really like to see that flexibility within what's offered, so that the student and teacher together can build an exam that really helps the student to show the examiner, whether it's face-to-face or digitally, what their strengths are. So I think that's a really great thing to go forward, and I hope that we will continue on that pathway.
Thank you. Another really positive reflection. Georgia, you are next on my list. I think you were well set up for remote and digital already. So what thing are you going to keep hanging on to that you've done this year?
I mean, I've been teaching online before the pandemic. I'm not going to lie, it's my preferred choice, as you can imagine. The reason being is the accessibility to students for me has increased infinitely, and the specific time constraints for me, I can just end a class and not have to show them to the door, or can we 5 minutes in, you know, that whole rigmarole of like 2 seconds, be with, you know, none of that's happening. It's fantastic. It's a lot more time saving on my part. It also, I think, is a lot more hands-on for the student, because it means with all the tools that are available, the student can take control of their practice. And as I was a student myself, the tools that were available for me when I was growing up were simply the recordings that ABRSM put out, but they were too fast for me, you know, and there wasn't any middle ground. And I think the tools that are available now enable students who can't already do something, come at it at a different way, at 100 different ways, to reach, you know, their connection with their music. And I think for me, that was why I've always really enjoyed the tech that is available, because it makes it, you know, breaks down those journeys for students. So yeah, I'm really excited, and I will be doing more of this in future. I'm not zoomed out. And I think and what, you know, what these exam boards are doing in terms of making those exams accessible so that they can submit this month, you know, or right now, has made a huge change on their development, so they aren't held back to the terms. They can actually practice, because music is not going to, you know, students aren't going to get better by just waiting till the summer's over and then start the lessons again. Students are going to get better by being addicted to playing music, to getting that buzz from playing music. And these apps and these online exams are exactly the tools we need. So yeah. Thank you for sharing that enthusiasm for all things digital with us, and your tips and techniques as well. Natalie, you're up next. One thing from this year.
I don't think I can articulate it better than what Georgia just did, because I think it's very much along those same lines. It's about accessibility and about about that choice. Trinity's always kind of had this ethos of trying to offer as many different options to candidates so that they can pursue their own pathways or choose what's right for them. And I think having that digital option, especially as, you know, nobody, I mean, face-to-face, we're so excited about face-to-face performances coming back and exams coming back, but the fact that, you know, YouTube and Twitch and performance, you know, apps were already there, and young people are exploring it. It fits. Digital assessments kind of fit in with that landscape, and it just means that I used to find, I mean, I did my grade exams, but I used to find it so nerve-wracking going to that exam room and to have that alternative to just say, okay, I'm going to do it in my bedroom, and I'm gonna perform it in my own time and in my own way. I just think it's really lovely and just going to open things up so much more, not necessarily for all professional musicians, but just make it that much more enjoyable for people.
Thank you. Beautifully articulated, actually, Natalie. So thank you for that. Nav, over to you now and your cat.
So
this year.
Really quickly, all of the people have said this thing. Luckily, people have been teaching online for a long time. We all kind of were like, no. But what's happened, which is gorgeous, is the world has come to an acceptance of that. So now we can offer so many more options because they're going to engage with it. And I think that's the big takeaway for me from this year. Watching all arts organizations across the board, they've all reported much greater engagement in all of their online, in all of their projects. So everybody's talking about the future being hybrid, and being aware and being ready for that process. But I think at a very personal teaching level, there is a level of nervousness and or safety that can be taken into account when you can teach from your own private studio here in your safe space. So there's no exposure level. And if you choose to have face-to-face lessons and where you're at, depending on where you're at in your journey, then you can minimize and manage that. And there's been a lot of growth and awareness about how you can then do as much as you can online in order that you minimize the impact of, you know, face-to-face time. That's just in that perspective. But I've loved the fact that, yeah, now more and more people can acknowledge I could teach a kid in Tokyo. That's totally fine. That's not strange anymore. And it's fantastic because then you can time manage your week and etc. And Georgia said it, efficiency. It's so potentially useful to some people trying to figure out how to drive around a locality. Or in fact, no, they can just lesson to lesson, bang, bang, bang. And the family don't have to do the driving, parking, waiting, sitting outside thing either. Perfect. Nav, next.
That's fantastic, and I think you're right. The options in terms of inclusion, in terms of reach, but also in terms of well-being for families, for teachers, and for pupils have really opened up this year. So thank you for highlighting those. Now, John, I think, unless I've missed somebody, I think you are our final panelist to talk about what really excites you to take forwards from this year. And if you're okay to feed back to Judy's question at the same time, that would be fantastic. Just give you a double challenge. Thank you.
Well, I'll try and be as concise as I can. I mean, I think the mindset that various of others have referred to is the thing that we need to keep. There's an acceptance level which is transformed from where it would have been 18 months ago. You know, let's keep that. From a more sort of personal perspective, it's the ability to hold events just like this, actually. And we're not going to stop doing this. It's so much more agile. You can reach so many more people. I've had somebody on the call from India. That is new. It's fabulous. And I think the online collective, the online connection is something we really want to hold on to and weave into a hybrid new way of being. To the point about performance, yeah, I totally understand what you're saying about that. Of course, performance is one of our criteria for the pieces, but I guess what I'm driving at when I'm sort of saying that is that, you know, you don't perform the oral tests, you don't perform the sight reading, you don't perform the scales. It's a series of tasks. And, you know, if you're a piano candidate, you might do the scales first and then the pieces. And if you're a trumpeter, you might do a couple of pieces and then the oral tests and then your third unaccompanied piece. It's a sequence of events which are assessed separately from each other. They don't have an interactive way of affecting each other. Whereas from first note to last note in a performance, if we imagine it on a concert stage or a school platform, whatever it may be, everything that happens from the beginning to the end is part of a kind of curated performance event, performance occasion. And those things are quite different between the two types of assessment, but absolutely not to take away from the fact that, you know, when you're playing a piano piece or a violin piece or singing or guitar, whatever it may be, in a practical exam, of course, each of those individual items is a performance. But I think my point is they don't connect. They don't have a sequence. It doesn't matter what order you play them in. So there's a difference there in terms of the sort of helicopter view of owning that as a performance totality.
I'm sorry, I would have to disagree in that when you play the three pieces, you've got an early Baroque piece, then you have a romantic piece, then you have a sort of a modern piece, and that's usually how repertoire is created. And I make sure that the children choose three pieces. I encourage them to play all three at once, so there's no difference.
Well, that's obviously a way of looking at it, but we meet lots of candidates who look at it a different way, and lots of teachers who have a different approach. So it's absolutely what suits the candidate best, and I think that's a theme that's come through the whole presentation. Yeah,
I think that's absolutely true. That theme of choice, of flexibility, and of diversity and inclusion have threaded through everything that all of you have said. And I'd just like to reiterate my very sincere thanks to each and every one of you for your enthusiasm, for how you've all dealt with this last year and how you've shared your journeys with us this morning. And I think there's lots of optimism about going forward as we gradually move from wholly online to something more hybrid, but yes, take a lot from this year with us. So thank you very much. I've got one last question from Georgia. Georgia, I'm going to give you 1 minute to say what you want to say. Are you there, Georgia?
We're both fighting the unmute button, sorry. Just in conjunction with what John and Jude are saying, I, as far as I understand it, in terms of the practical examination, you are assessed on pitch, time, tone, shape and performance. So within that piece you are actually assessed of the performance, but it's not the performance as a whole. And so that you have to reflect the piece that you are playing. So if you're playing a sad piece, you don't want to be like all jolly in your body language because you want to connect musically. But obviously the assessment as a whole is not taken in as a whole performance concert setting. John's nodding, okay, phew, that's all right. But I did actually wanted to raise on that note, I've always wondered, how would you, and I know we're over time, but how would you differentiate specifically between tone and shape if you are playing an instrument like the piano, where you could have dynamics, but you can't change the sound of the piano. You can't take it to like a, you know, an electric piano or a da-da-da piano. So how would you differentiate those two, John? Sorry.
Am I allowed to answer, Emily?
You are. You're allowed very quickly, and say bye to everyone.
In terms of time, okay, very quickly. Tone. I mean, I think many people would say that your touch does affect the tone that you make on a piano. Obviously, you know, so tone is the sound, the voice, the timbre, all the characteristics of the sound of the instrument and everything that you can do with it. Whereas a shape is kind of what you do with that. So it's the things that are sort of implicit in the music. And when we take a piece of Baroque music, there'll be no apparent shape. It's just black and white dots and lines. You know, where do the phrases head towards? Where do they ebb away from? Where are the points of emphasis? What sort of shape do you want in terms of the meter and the emphases? And so it's all those things. Old-fashioned Sibelius used to play very accurately, but with no shape. Do you know what I mean? It even did dynamics, but it was somehow so robotic. It didn't have that kind of organic quality which we know of performance in music. So I think it's in those areas that we're thinking about shape. What are you doing with the music to give it musical sense and to give it musical personality? I mean, it comes under interpretation in a way. I mean, shape's not a binary objective thing. It's something that you decide to do, and it's to do with breathing and bowing and fingering and all sorts of things. So that would be my quick way of differentiating. I'm happy to take that further another time if that's any help.
So it's like cadence. It's the inner cadence. It's the inner pulse groove of the music. And
just like, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I understand. So we've got dynamics and touch, and we've got the inner cadence. Fantastic. Thank you, John.
Yeah, and they all contribute in their different ways, and different instruments too. I mean, a trombone can do different things from a recorder, from a keyboard, from singing. You know, they all shape in different ways.
Thank you for answering, and thank you all, both delegates and panelists, for such an exciting morning. I know we could talk about this forever, and I'm going to have to draw us to an end now, but it's great that everybody's got so much to talk about, and I really look forward to keeping this conversation going. Thank you for getting our festival off to such an exciting start. I'm really grateful to all of you for speaking